Hello. Today is June 9th, 2023. My name is Brie Carranza, and this is the second in a series of interviews where support engineers at GitLab are taking a step back from the day-to-day ticket work and asking questions and getting to know one another and sharing those conversations with everyone. So we'll introduce ourselves and then dive into the questions that we had planned. My name is Brie Carranza. I'm a senior support engineer at GitLab. Will you please introduce yourself?
Sure, nice to be here. My name is Manuel Grabowski. I'm also a senior support engineer, and I have been with GitLab for a tiny bit over 1.5 years now.
Cool beat. So that's funny. I just hit 3 years, like with the release of 16. So that was very cool. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So I will dive into the questions that we had sort of planned out. Um, so if you had to, in 60 seconds or less, describe what do you do here? What would you say?
Hey, I haven't timed it. I'm not sure if I'll succeed. I decided to get a little fancy with the answer here, and I will say I copy, create, and collaborate. And I mean copy in the sense of the infamous good artists copy, great artists steal sense, right? Because so much of what I do comes from our documentation, from older tickets, from workarounds and issues. Like I'm a large language model with actual intelligence behind it. I'm just rearranging text for a lot of the time. That's not all though, right? I also create, I do original work. I come up with my own solutions with rethinking processes myself, all that stuff. That's create. And the most important thing is almost none of that happens in a vacuum. Collaboration, that's the lifeblood of working at GitLab for me.
That's beautiful. I really like the copy, create, collaborate. It's catchy. I'm gonna
Yeah,
write that down
sounds
somewhere.
like it's like from a PlayStation commercial for their new thing.
It does. That's very cool. That's very cool. Okay, so let's get into it. One of the reasons I was extremely excited to interview you is we have like a very interesting story about how you and I met and then how you joined the team at GitLab. So will you please tell that story?
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories to share. I will never tire of telling it. And it's amazing that we managed to actually have that interview today because this whole story started exactly 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I wrote a support ticket as a GitLab customer. I was at my old job back then where I started out as a full stack / backend developer. Over time in that job, I moved more and more into a DevOps like role, mainly because I was, I guess, the biggest nerd on the team. Like whenever something, I don't know, Docker or Linux servers or things came up, they went, "Oh, Manu, don't you know that stuff?" And I usually did. And in that role, I also managed, suggested, and then managed the move to GitLab. So yeah, that left me administrating at work a GitLab instance after I had already been administrating a personal one for many years myself. And I did have a problem at some point and had to reach out to support. And the support experience was just mind-blowingly good. I literally never experienced something like that before in my life. And I made sure to let you and the support team in general know, because at the end of each ticket, you get to leave a review. And I left a review, and apparently that review was positive enough, outstanding enough for your manager to reach out to me and actually say, "Hey, thanks for taking the time to let us know. And it's so great to see that our efforts are seen and appreciated." And I said a bunch of funny things in there, like, "Oh, don't let the bean counters take over, and you cannot measure support quality like that, blah, blah, blah." And he was like, "Yeah, we know. And that all happened during a time where I had already, basically decided that I would want a change of scenery myself. And just working with you on the ticket, because it was a pretty complex thing. A while ago, I read through it again and I struggled understanding everything that we understood back then. It was really complex. But working with you on that made me realize, wait a second, like the work that you are doing for me here on this ticket, that's not that far removed from what I'm doing for my team all the time, like with a little different focus, of course, but I could be good at that too. I think I would have fun with that too. So I told him, like, hey, now that I've already got you on the line, basically. And yeah, then your manager connected me to a recruiter. I went through the process, and today here I am.
That's so cool. That's so wild. Just to say, like, thank you for that feedback. That was very amazing. And that was circulated pretty broadly within GitLab. I know that I'm fairly confident Sid is aware of it and mentioned it in a call that I'm not sure if I can link, but thank you for that feedback. That was awesome.
Well deserved, well deserved.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so you mentioned you've been at GitLab for a bit over a year and a half. That's enough time to learn stuff. So do you have any like bits of advice that you would go back and give to the Manu that started at GitLab?
Yeah, I've got two pieces of advice, and they might seem slightly at odds with each other, but they really aren't. The first thing is you are further along than you think you are. Fairly early on, when I started like having pairings with people who have been here longer, I've gotten such good feedback on my work and my progress, and it didn't take too long before I heard, oh, you should have been hired as a senior right away. And I think most of us in support, at least, have some difficulty accepting compliments. So as most would do, I just kind of hand wave that away. But if you hear it often enough, you do think about it a little, and I understand why it was said. And I also understand why I wasn't hired as a senior right away. I'm not like now having a grudge or anything. But yeah, I don't think I ever mentioned this before, to be honest. What in the end finally made me say, okay, now I will go full steam ahead with my promotion to senior, was actually seeing someone else promoted who started around the same time as myself. And I thought like, oh, wait a second. If he can be senior, I guess I can be senior already. Like I had this, just wait a year. Why? Right? I was further along than I gave myself credit for. So that's the first thing. The other thing is you think you already live and understand the values, but you don't. And that's a little absolute in how I'm wording this. I absolutely knew the values, and I already cherished and lived them in many ways. That's why I wanted to work here. But I've had a lot of little moments since I joined here where I understood, oh wow, I've read the value before, but it just didn't click yet for this. Like, oh, I can apply it here. Of course, that makes perfect sense. An example, very early on. So in the EMEA region, we have a weekly call for the whole team. And we have an agenda document for that, and a whole process like who is note taker, who is moderator, blah, 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 all that stuff. And as a new joiner, you often see things that others have become blind to. So I saw a few like, oh, the process is it's a bit weird. It's not, and touching that process, that agenda document, that felt like, ooh, I'm new here. I can't. So I had the values, like everyone can contribute, bias for action, all that. I had that deep enough internalized that I had zero problem starting a discussion and saying, hey, you know what? I've observed this. I would suggest we do this. What do you think? And then one of the first comments on that was, that sounds good. So is there a reason you didn't just do it? Like, why didn't you just do it? And it like clicked for me. Oh yeah, of course. Like it's a two-way door decision. It's so easy to revert. Why didn't I just do it? And I think I've made quite a lot of progress, but that still happens all the time. And that's good. Like that's iteration. That's what it's all about. All of us have these moments all the time, I think.
Do you want to talk about, so it sounds like that was maybe a rhetorical question, but do you want to talk about the answer to why you didn't do it then and why you were more inclined to?
That's the thing. I don't think it was a rhetorical question.
Mhm.
I think it was generally someone asking, is there a reason? Can we change something so that next time you have an easier time actually just changing it? I believe fairly strongly that it wasn't rhetorical. The
Gotcha.
answer, yeah, I mean, I was too afraid. Like I felt too new. But that's the thing. There is no such thing. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if someone new joins and makes a suggestion or just changes something, I would think, oh, awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Or I would think, oh, dang, you don't know this aspect. Apparently we haven't documented this. Now I will tell you, and let's see, can we iterate on that change somehow? But never would I say, wow, you can just change that. That's not how we work here.
Yeah, that's
But it's
beautiful.
something that's, I think, deeply internalized from how most of the world operates.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that you mentioned two-way door decisions, but I think that safety of knowing I can make this change and we can revert it is
Yeah.
very helpful for, yeah, just bias for action and do the thing. It'll be okay. Sweet. Okay. So I don't know about you, but I like fun different tools and processes and things like that. So I wanted to just give you an opportunity to ask, are there any tools or processes that you wish more people knew about? Just like they're so awesome that you're like, oh, this would be so cool if more people knew about this.
So generally, I wish more people used the terminal for everything.
Well, yeah.
um, like if you're not already using it for almost everything, just start using it more today. It took me at least a decade before I was really comfortable in the terminal. Like I went through all the cliched phases. Like I had the I don't even know how to exit VI thing, and thinking, who in their right mind would enjoy you that it doesn't make sense. What is going on? And then over time you just think, oh, wait a second, couldn't I just that would be pretty efficient if I could have it internal. You start seeing that, and like nothing will ever beat a good command line tool in terms of efficiency and flexibility. So that's general speaking. For support specifically, that kind of means adoption of our dot files. Like we have these support dot files where we collect tools that are hopefully useful for the whole team. And I would call myself a pretty big terminal dot files nerd, and it took me at least a year after joining before I really went there and looked into how do I integrate this into my own workflow. That can be kind of daunting. I might be projecting. Maybe everyone else is using them already, and it was really just me who took so long. I don't quite think so, and I would really like to see more happening there, like in terms of adoption and more development in there. And to also give a non-terminal answer, there's two browser extensions I absolutely could not live without. The first one is copy as markdown, and I believe you mentioned that in one of your blog posts.
Yes, I did.
Right, it just allows you to select anything on a web page, copy as markdown, and it will do what it says. Like that is amazingly useful. That's the one. The other one is I think it's called just format link. It's very similar. Well, not necessarily, but I use it very similarly because the way I am letting it format my links is also into Markdown. So what this allows me to do is usually I go to our documentation and select the title of a section, and then do right click, copy as markdown link, and it will use what I've selected as the title of the link and link to what the current URL of the browser window is. That saves so much time when you write a sentence like, oh, could you please check this out in our such and such documentation? Just paste the link. And that is not possible with the copy as markdown extension. So I think both of these should be essentials for everyone in support at the very least. I'm using both of them privately as well. My blog is in markdown. Like, it's just super useful.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm definitely adding that second one, and we'll link to dot files and all of those things here. Sounds like there's like room for contributions to help with like usage instructions on dot files and stuff like that to make it even easier, because I think that you're right about adoption for dot files. So thank you.
Yeah. I have ideas on how we're gonna do that. But
Yay, cool beans. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that this is the second in a series. So I recently was interviewed by Bruno, and that was very exciting. And some of the questions that he asked me, I wanted to ask you, because I think that they're like important questions to talk about. So the first one is about visibility and what people see, and then like what's behind the screen, behind Slack, all that kind of a thing. So the question, I think the way he phrased it is, are you making sacrifices that are not visible in order to get everything done?
That's tricky. Um, like I cringe at the idea of calling it a sacrifice, and I
Mm.
like immediately want to downplay it and say like your introduction to the question. Yeah, everyone has that. Like, ugh, don't look at me. It's okay. It's okay. Like this kind of reaction. But I'll try to fight that urge and actually answer your question.
Thank you.
So what can I say? I frequently work much longer than I planned to. I frequently skip my lunch break or change plans, or like, oh, I wanted to go shopping. Oh, I can go shopping tomorrow. I'll just order pizza or something like that to accommodate work. However, these are my own choices. Like that's not something that's asked of me. It's not like my manager ever like manages me and says, "Oh, can you stay?" Like that just doesn't happen here, like at all. That's me. Um, and it's also usually not because like the work demands it or anything. It's not that at the planned end of my shift I see, oh no, I haven't met my quota or anything, and decide I'll work 2 hours longer to like no. um I just get lost in work fairly easily because I enjoy it so much. And I will say that's, I guess, a fairly nice problem to have about work, but it's still a problem, I think. And it's tricky because I'm like a really strong proponent of workers' rights and all that jazz. Like not to get too much into politics, ignoring like the cliched US versus EU comparison that our connection like invites. But like I'm just extremely, yeah, probably left wing in that regard. Yet I work myself to the bone. So how does that compute, right? Um, and we'll need to get a little personal here, because a reason for that, honestly, is my life is a bit of a mess, or at least it feels like that to me uh, quite often. And that might sound depressing, but the joy that I get from work, and I do get genuine joy from work, really. That's one of the better things in my life. And it can often feel like the only thing I have a real grip on in my life. And so it's very easy to double down on that, right? And focus on that. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's thinking about this reminded me about how we all have all this talk going on about machines are taking our jobs, and we need UBI and like all these topics. And I always hate this debate because it's focusing so much on this social welfare, and people will be lazy and don't want to work and that stuff. Um, and I just think the much bigger problem is like the collective depression the entire world will fall into when people won't be able to derive meaning for their lives out of their jobs anymore, because that's a thing. um I was unemployed for a month between university and my first job, voluntarily. I could have started a month earlier, but I wanted to chill a little bit. That was at a time where I had a lot going on. That was an amazing time. Like I was in a great relationship. I had like, yeah. So a month sounds like nothing, but Brie, I was bored out of my mind at the end of that month,
I believe it.
right? And like that experience always stuck with me. So yeah, as much as I support the ideal of saying it's just a job, you are not your work, that's all true, and that's, yes, like I'm behind that. But I personally, I'm having a really hard time like not defining myself largely through my work. That's just how it is.
Wow. That was a lot. Thank you for being like brave enough and comfortable enough to say all of that like very publicly. That's something.
Yeah, that's something, and that's honestly another reason why I like being here. Like this environment makes it fairly easy. Like I know that's of course it's me as well. Not everyone is like that, but the environment plays a large role. And I mean, I know that you understand this, and will not think I'm weird for being so open or anything. But I know the same thing about like everyone in the company basically, and that's a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It definitely being at GitLab, especially 3 years in, I'm much more comfortable just, hey, yeah, we're just gonna do a thing and put it on YouTube and it's just a
Yeah,
part of the day. I'm gonna go do 18 other things today. It's wild. Um,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, thank you. That was a lot. Okay. The second question from my interview with Bruno that I'd like to ask you is, I think, similar and related. We talked about avoiding burnout, but I like to expand that to we don't just avoid burnout. So I want to just ask you a little bit about how you manage and avoid, if possible,
Mhm.
burnout.
Okay. So I don't know if I am, to be honest. I do worry about it quite a bit. I'll say this. For a lot of things, people say if you're wondering about it, it's already too late.
Hmm.
Like take alcoholism, right? If someone is wondering, "Ooh, do I have a drinking problem?" The answer is probably yeah. And I have been told, or I've read, that for burnout, that is actually not like that. If you're still wondering, do I have burnout? You don't, because if you had, you would know. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if that's just gatekeeping from people with severe burnout. I don't know, like probably semantics and exact clinical definitions at play here. I don't know. So I do think I work too much, as I just said. I don't think I'm truly in danger of actual burnout in the sense of that what I just said. Um, I'm probably not kind enough to myself in terms of taking time off when I should, but yeah, again, that ties into what I just said. I could easily take off 2 weeks here, like unlimited PTO and all that jazz. And then my work related stress will go down. But then I spiral into depression. And does that help me much? Like that's tricky.
Yeah. Hmm. That's interesting. Okay. Thank you. That concludes this section of the interview. So we'll okay, all right.
Moving on to fun topics again.
Yeah, yeah. I think this one is really, really fun. So okay. What do you do when you look at a ticket and you're just like, I really don't know what to do here?
Okay. Okay, so do you want an honest answer or an inspirational answer to that
But I
question?
would love both. I would genuinely love both.
Like, yeah, let's be real. Sometimes I just move on to the next ticket.
Okay.
That's just how it is. I mean, lots of asterisks, right?
Yeah.
If the SLA allows, and I mean that's fine, right? Because there is some need for us to be efficient, and
Hmm.
it can make sense to leave a ticket for someone else if you know, like, wow, that's really just not my thing, and there is someone on my team who knows how to handle this. Um, and what I would also say is there is two different kinds of I really don't know what to do here. The one kind is I don't know, but I know how to figure it out.
Hmm.
And then there is the tougher kind where I don't even know where would I start trying to figure this out. It's rare, but it exists, and those are tough. And interestingly, this became harder for me as a senior, I think, because now that I'm a senior and fairly confident in that role, I have a lot going on. So saying, all right, no idea at all, not even where to look at, but I just spent 2 days on this. That's harder now, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm much more mindful of my time, and there's choices I have to make on where I spend my time on. which then in turn has the fun side effect of kicking off my imposter syndrome and making me think, ooh, am I avoiding hard stuff now that I don't have to work for the promotion anymore or stuff like that? Which, of course not. Yeah, it's a tricky thing to balance this need and desire for efficiency with the also need to like keep challenging yourself and learning new things. I guess to end on an inspirational note, there is no such thing where you actually can't figure it out. It can be that the only next step you can take is posting on Slack saying, hey, I'm trying to work this ticket and I don't even know where to begin. Help. And that's fine.
That's fine.
That's for a senior to do just as well.
Yeah.
Even more so maybe to show that that's just a thing. How often it makes sense to do that in terms of efficiency and that's another question.
Yeah, I think it's especially important to remember that everyone has those moments where, yeah, I don't know. And that's okay. And it's better to say that and do something about it and then learn it rather than.
You know, one thing I would like to say in that aspect as well is when you look at someone else's work, like especially in support, you look at a solved ticket, you see the things that worked. You focus on them. Like you might even sometimes you see the detour. Oh, this wasn't actually it. Oh, can you try this instead, please? Oh, that was it. But like just how you notice headwind all the time versus tailwind just the second it kicks in and then forget about it instantly. The same effect is at play here. Like you just see, oh wow, they solved this insanely complex ticket. Whew, I could never do that. But what you don't see is that other person crying in front of their desk because they didn't even know what to respond. Like exaggerated, of course, but that's something to keep in mind. Like we are all, none of us is an actual magician.
Correct. We talked in my interview with Bruno, we didn't talk about crying, but we talked about throwing keyboards out the window in those moments.
Oh, so,
yeah. Yep. Okay, cool beans. Okay, so tell me about a change that you helped to implement that you are particularly excited about.
That's hard to pick. I'm excited about all the changes that I'm like allowed to help bring along here. Like even things that seem small or unimportant. So I mentioned the weekly agenda document thing earlier. So fairly early on, like I added automation there. Now you don't have to manually copy and paste the agenda template in there. It's a tiny thing, but I'm happy every time I see it being used. It's just, oh, yes. I guess it's probably recency bias, but in the past months, I've added 2 new tools / scripts to the support.files we just talked about. One is to quickly identify the product manager or the technical writer for a certain product group, which is something that I have to do so often.
All the time.
And it just like this tool cuts it down to seconds. Before it was 30 to 60 seconds. It wasn't even that long before, I guess. But still, now it's like 3 seconds and I'm done. Like I'm back where I need it with tabbing to the terminal, doing it. Like it's amazing. I love that. The second is to easily add custom emoji reactions to GitLab issues, merge requests, comments. That's also in large parts about efficiency. Like I did that before using like curl commands with the GitLab API manually, basically, but it wasn't efficient to go back to my history, look it up, what's the command again, replace stuff. So I wrote a tool where I just put the parameters and I'm done with it. And it's not so much about efficiency here why I'm excited about this. I'm excited about this because like both of these tools actually were helpful across the support boundaries. Other people also have to look up PMs and technical writers. And it was amazing to see people happy about that tool. And then just yesterday, I had a coffee chat with someone and helped them set up the support.files on their machine, someone not from support, because they were so excited to use the emoji thing. And
That's so cool.
that's amazing, right? And yeah, I just, with the emoji thing, I hope more people being able to easily use it will make it more visible that we actually have this functionality, because a lot of people don't know about it, right? But when you see, wait a second, that's not one of the normal emoji, how did that get there? I'm just hoping that future improvements in the product itself might happen because of more awareness.
So cool. That's awesome. I'll definitely link to that script in the description so people can check that out, because custom emoji are very cool. Regular emoji are cool too. Okay, so while we're talking about changes, would you talk me through a change that you helped to implement that was like difficult, but ultimately worthwhile, if you have like an example?
Yeah, that's actually something we worked a little bit on together as well. I would say adding the support team contributions label automation, that was tricky. So what that is about is, we in support, we want to measure our impact on the product, I guess. So whenever we do changes that are outside of our support internal stuff, we put a label on that, support team contribution. And that was a manual thing for a while. And at some point, I guess the light bulb went on in my head, and I thought, wait a second, why are we doing that manually? We have all that information available. Like, there is a YAML file where I can look up that my user account is part of the support team. So what gives? And we already knew, of course, from our day-to-day work, that a ton of stuff is being done automatically that is very similar. So I knew, okay, that it must be possible somehow. And it wasn't that tricky on a technical level to figure out how do these automations work? How do I make one that does this? It was a little tricky. It was, I think, more tricky, or how do I say, institutional wise, like, who is maintaining that stuff? Who do I ask, can I add this? Can you review my change? Like that was a little tricky. Right. I mean, we have the everyone can contribute mantra, but it can still be tricky in practice, because this is not something I do a lot. So the project where I had to add this, they did have contribution tips and README and whatnot, but I'm so far removed from that it didn't help me enough for it to be really easy. But that's fine, right? There is a line you have to find. Like, they can't explain to me how RSpec tests work. Like, they just say, here's how you run your RSpec tests. That didn't help me much, because I don't know how to write RSpec tests.
Right.
So it was tricky in that aspect. I guess it was more technically difficult than I'm giving it credit, because now thinking back to it, I implemented at least 2 different versions of it, and then found out that the first one was just super inefficient. And that's when I then started doing it in the way that I described now. I did write up a little, well, not really blog post, but an issue about that journey. But I just found out that that's only internally visible for team members. So I wasn't actually aware of that. I'll need to rectify that, and we can link to that then as well in the description.
Cool beans. Let's definitely do that. Yeah, that change was really helpful, because there's an email that goes out at the end of each week that says, hey, this is who in support added things. And I really like being on that email, and I definitely noticed the impact of your change, because as much as I like being in that email, I would miss things. And like,
Yeah, sure. That's why you want to automate things, right?
yeah,
Because
it
we're
was
all
awesome.
human and we forget things. And I think after I announced that change, some people, of course, right? Some people, we are about 150 people in support. So obviously some people said, wait, we have a label for that, right? So now, yeah. And
It's a good
now that
thing.
it's automated, we catch everything. It's amazing.
Yep, it's awesome. I love it. Cool. Alrighty. So the next topic is very exciting. Earlier this year, we both participated in the GitLab book club for the staff engineer's path. And there are videos of the book club discussions, and that's been a while. It's been a while since that. So just wanted to check in with you and see, like, what are the things from that still resonate, like the big topics that you are still thinking about, given that it's been, I think, 2 months since the book club wrapped. Maybe not quite that long.
I would have said probably longer, but okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I'll say what I said a couple of times during that book club, and I still feel like an arrogant prick when I say it. But not much, if anything, in that book felt particularly new or insightful to me. Not saying anything in there was wrong or bad, but I've all the time thought, yeah, it isn't that obvious? Isn't everyone operating like that? And yeah. So I guess one thing I learned from it is, yeah, no, not everyone is operating like that. I think what stuck with me from the book club is the connections we made, because that was a cross-department thing, and just meeting other people and talking about these topics, even if they weren't particularly new to me. That was amazing. That was insightful. That was helpful. The one thing I would say that I really took away from it that was new-ish, or that I hadn't considered as much, is that, like, at the level, like if you go to staff plus level, you will need to look for work that serves the company to succeed, and that means a bit more from the top down than from the bottom up than I'm probably used to. I will say that I'm not sure how true that is, particularly here at GitLab, because we're not quite like a lot of other places. I still think it is also true at GitLab. So that's something I'm keeping in mind. We do have the skip level meetings regularly, right, where we talk to our manager's manager. So before the book club, I had not really considered, like, just asking her what's something I could or should focus on. Is there something on your mind that I could take on that serves the company, right? Like looking at the goals that coming from the top down. I will add the caveat that, at least for me and how I work and how I'm motivated, that's only true as long as what comes from the top down aligns with what I think is important. To a degree, like you need some ability to compromise, of course. And if that is not true, then I think the important thing is to change what's coming from the top down.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. You mentioned relationships. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I wound up, this is just a quick note, I wound up in a coffee chat with someone outside of GitLab who had seen the Staff Engineers Path book club videos and read along with the book. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we were kind of in a book club after the book club. It was just like, that's amazing. So cool. Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly, these kinds of things are the magic that comes from being open, being transparent. That's wonderful.
Wow. Cool beans. Okay, so we are like approaching the end, so just have like fun questions. All the questions are fun, but I have even more fun questions left. Okay, so and this ties into sort of what you were saying about the work that you do being important to you, which to me also sounds like fun. And you talked about enjoying work and stuff like that. Yeah. So one of the things I like about working at GitLab is it's fun and we get to do fun projects. So I'm curious, what are some fun projects you are working on or recently completed?
I mean, yeah, you said it, like there is very, very few things here that I wouldn't say are fun. Obviously, I have like favorite things to do and things where like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I already mentioned the dot files stuff. That was fairly recent. That was a lot of fun. Something that's still ongoing and will be ongoing for a while is I'm working with Ulysses from the Amir team as well. What we want to do is basically improve our library of easily deployable not necessarily test environments, but standard GitLab setups on GCP or AWS or whatnot, both in the sense of normal working, like fresh installation things, and also broken in a certain way already for training modules and stuff. Because currently we do have already a lot of cool things going on there. Like it's 10 clicks and I have like a full-fledged GitLab in the cloud with everything. But then after that, everything is manual. Like I want to test this specific feature with this integration. I have to do all that manually in the config. And we can automate that. That's the idea here. And like that's the whole thing. First, I myself had to figure out like, okay, how do we do this? Like, what would the structure for that even look like? I had no idea. I'm super new to Terraform, right? So that's an exciting thing for me to learn as well. But that also makes it take a while because I need to dedicate focused time if I want to make an impact there, as opposed to a lot of things where if I just have 10 minutes in between meetings or so, I can just knock out a doxMR. Like that's just bam, done. That's not this kind of thing. So it's a challenge to find time for it, but it's also nothing super urgent. And looking forward to continuing work there. And I mean, then yesterday, the two of us finished our big initial upgrade of the team tracking project. That was the most fun I've had in a while.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was very cool. One note, I want to go back to the Terraform thing. You talked about like time investment. I'm gonna guess something and you tell me if I'm right or not, but I think choosing something like Terraform that you're not extremely comfortable with, investing the time on it for that project with Ulysses is awesome for that project with Ulysses, but you also have this like residual benefit of you have a whole bunch of experience about Terraform for tickets that we get about Terraform. So it's one less thing in that category of you look at a ticket, I don't know what to do. One more kind of tickets that you kind of know what to do. Is that like?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the challenge with that is that I'm probably approaching or have already reached kind of my limit. If I learn new stuff now, things will fall down at the back.
Yeah.
I mean, you always retain something, but that's probably also making it hard to focus on new stuff very much because yeah, it's a careful decision to make. Like, what do you want to focus on?
Right. Very cool. Cool. Okay, let's see. Alrighty, so I think we can move on to the nerding out question if you're good on that.
I mean, wouldn't we want to talk a little bit about the team tracking project now that we've just finished it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what is it about? In support, we pair, work on tickets together. For that, for each of these meetings where we do that, we have an issue. And that issue has assignees for everyone who's on the meeting. So we have a history of all the meetings we had to work on tickets together. And naturally, at some point, someone, I think it was Cynthia, created a template with a list of all the support engineers in the team where you could like make a checkbox when you have had a pairing with someone. So like a little gamification to motivate you to meet more people on the team. And again, you probably start seeing a pattern here. At some point, I thought to myself, wait a second, why am I doing this manually? We have all the data available. Let us automate that. And I did hack together a script fairly quickly, and it worked fine. For at least a year, it was dormant, and I always had it in the back of my mind, like, oh, I have so many ideas what I want to do there. But it was already good enough. Motivation to actually again change something there, yeah, hard. And then, yeah, about 2 months ago, like the two of us decided we want to work on a project together, and we went through a few options, and in the end, we decided to focus on this. And what I found interesting about that experience is it played out quite a bit differently than I had originally thought it would, in the sense that like we learned that we work really well together async. When I pitched this, we said like we're gonna spend 8 weeks on a project. We're gonna have like an hour-long meeting each week and focus on this. So what I thought would happen is like each of us spent about an hour each week on this during this sync meeting that we had set up, worked on this together, maybe sometimes silently next to each other, like not necessarily all the time doing pair programming or stuff. But that's kind of how I envisioned it. But we were both so motivated that most of the work just happened async outside of that planned sync meeting. And we wound up not really needing that meeting. Like we used it for project management and meta discussions in the end, but we could have done without almost all these sync meetings. I think they were probably necessary for a couple of discussions we had on like general direction and a few tougher design choices, to use very big words for a very small project. So I think there was some value for sync, but that was interesting to me. Like it, as I said, it really played out differently than I had imagined it. And then also, I mentioned this with the support team contributions label thing. Everyone can contribute. I would also have said everyone can contribute to this project after I had this initial draft out that we now improved on. And that was true. Like I would have been delighted for a merge request on this. And I was delighted after I made that public back then in the first place. 1 or 2 issues were written like, oh, I have this idea, or we could do this. And that was amazing. But as we've seen, like from your experience joining the project and initially having a bit of a hard time to even see through the code base, to again use a pretty big word for a pretty small thing, it just, the code base wasn't very inviting. So I didn't do as much as I could have done to make everyone can contribute happen. I'm not saying that I did anything bad, right? You have to pick your fights. Like I think I did a minimal viable blah thing. It worked fine. Like at least 10 support engineers used it like for a year now and didn't have to do it manually anymore. Like it served its purpose well. But still, it was interesting for me to see that now that a lot of what we did in those 8 weeks was improving that aspect of it.
Yep, absolutely. That was like, maybe the closest I've been to a refactor, like before and after. And yeah, we could probably go back and look, but I was able to contribute to it much more once the refactor was done, because I was like, okay, there's individual functions and doc strings, and I am not worried about what is this massive line doing. There were lots of loops, and yeah, it looks great now. So I think it did a great job. Cool. Okay. So I have a couple like fun, just nerding out questions. This is my definition of fun, and I think it will be shared, but we'll find out. So okay, there's 3 questions. What is your absolute favorite GitLab feature? If you had to pick one.
I guess saying CI/CD is a bit of a cop-out because that's just too much. But it is like the way it's all integrated. That's what made me fall in love with it in the first place. So maybe I can pick more specifically review apps.
Okay.
Right, because I was coming from a web dev background, and like even before we switched to GitLab, we did have custom test environments for each branch. But again, the integration, like just having the URL right on the merge request, it's just amazingly useful. And I guess why I like CI and pipelines so much in general is it's kind of an extension of the command line interface, to go back to my earlier answer, right? So whatever madness I cook up in my terminal, I can then put it into a script and in a pipeline, and it's the opportunities, the possibilities just explode. I can do so much. Of course, for simple things, I could also just put it in a cron job. I know, but like having the job logs right there, where I'm also then versioning the script, it's my jam.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
funnily enough, that is exactly how the team tracking project works. That's exactly it.
Yep.
It's a scheduled pipeline. It's a script. Like that's what I do.
Yeah, beautiful, great callback. I will say that what you described is precisely what sold me on GitLab. I was like, it's just all right here. It's amazing. I love it. Cool. Okay. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you love Kubernetes and why?
Okay. So wait, when I pick one, does that mean there is still some love?
Yes, because it's not 0.
Okay, I guess one. I
Okay.
mean, let me tell you a little story. It took me quite a while to get Docker. I will freely admit that I was a Luddite on Docker for a long time. I saw people gushing over it, and I was thinking, I don't get it. What this sounds so dumb. Why don't you just spin up a virtual machine? Like this doesn't make any sense. There is this text file, and what the heck is compose? It just didn't make sense to me until after years and years. At some point, I must have run across a use case where it kind of did make sense to me, and suddenly, like, oh, that's actually kind of useful. And I'm still very much waiting for that moment with Kubernetes. Like I get it on some level. I understand kinda. And it's probably harder for that moment to happen because I'm not a big enterprise,
Right.
right? But still, yeah, I don't know. A lot of big enterprises, I think, also didn't have that moment, but are still using Kubernetes for some reason. I guess that adds to my frustration then. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So last question.
Okay.
What is your, so we've talked a lot about terminal, and we're both just
Yeah.
love the terminal kind of people. If you had to pick one, what is your number one must have? And you can
No, no,
pick
no.
2 or 3 if you can pick
Okay.
2 or 3 if you want to.
I was just okay. Okay. So, but out of which kind of pool? Like, do core utils count? Can I say grep,
Yes,
or is that
yes,
too basic? Okay,
absolutely. No, grep is amazing.
it is. So let me begin with JQ, which is
Okay.
very well known, and I would argue is probably the most important piece of glue of the last decade. I mean, everything is JSON now, and JQ is what brings JSON in the terminal, right? I mean, sure, there's alternatives then, but what do you do without JQ? Let me give a few maybe not as well-known answers. The first obvious choice is the lolcat, alternative to the cat command, which pukes out pretty rainbows into your terminal. It's amazing, makes everything pretty.
Yes.
The keychain tool, not to be confused with the Apple keychain thing. I think the keychain command or tool comes from Funtoo. And it's basically a front end to managing your SSH keys and adding them to the SSH agent so that you don't have to type in your passphrase all the time. I'm pretty sure that there is much easier alternatives, but I've never really bothered understanding them because 15 years ago, I Googled, how do I do this? Found keychain. It's amazing. It's been in my dot files ever since. And I never have to type in my passphrase more than once after rebooting. Super useful. Auto SSH is like a wrapper around SSH, which just reconnects if the connection dies, which is super useful if you're on spotty Wi-Fi or something. Diff so fancy is also something not a lot of people use. I will argue that Git is best used on the terminal. Let's add a hot take at the end as well.
I love it.
And this basically makes Git diff on your terminal prettier. It's just a script that parses the diff output and makes it prettier. And it looks much more like you would know from web interfaces or GUI tools. I will get us censored at the end, and I will say the fuck tool is also amazing. When you have a typo in your command, and it gives an error, or if you, so the most common, honestly, the most common use case is you have forgotten to add the upstream branch yet, and you want to push, and it says, I don't know. And it already tells you, did you mean? And yes, I know Git now has added a option.
Yes.
But what I used to do was, after running into this problem, I just typed fuck, and it would do what the command above suggested. And it has a ton of integrations. Like, it's not just that, like, it's very smart. And I think, yeah, it's just open source. You can add your own stuff. It sounds like it's just a dumb joke, but it's actually useful. It actually saves me time. So I do like it. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. So that concludes the set of questions that I had prepared. So like, thank you for the time and for being so open. Like, you shared a lot that is going to be on the internet for the foreseeable future. So thank you. Before we wrap, do you have any like parting words that you would like to share? No is okay.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think so.
Okay.
My parting words on this day, very fitting, would be thank you for bringing me here.
Thank you. Okay, cool. I will stop the recording there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.